This presentation discusses element interactivity and chunking in MFL. It aims to promote a potential model of teaching chunking. And these are the aims of the session here below. An interesting aspect of cognitive load theory is element interactivity, which could be defined as the number of different knowledge elements which need to be coordinated in working memory in order to accomplish a task. And arguably, the idea of element interactivity could be applied to MFL in the sense that an individual piece of vocabulary has only really itself to process or to coordinate in working memory compared to a sentence like the one in the second bullet there, le chat s'est assis sur le paillasson, which has an awful lot more elements to coordinate in order to accomplish the task of recalling it, say, spontaneously in a transfer context. For example, if a student had to say that in the exam. Clearly, having to recall and coordinate a reflexive infinitive like s'asseoir in the perfect tense, along with the other parts of this sentence, is would be higher in element interactivity than just recalling le chat. Therefore, if there is a higher element interactivity in a chunk, then it would make sense to teach the chunk as a whole chunk and not rely so much on having explicitly taught the grammar behind the chunk throughout the course and then expecting an optimum level of spontaneous transfer to occur in a student's spoken or written answer by the time they come to that point of transfer. If teaching chunks across the course can help to promote transfer to a final written or spoken answer, then arguably it would make sense to choose a chunk which is composed of otherwise difficult grammatical concepts, as well as choosing a chunk which can be used across many different topics. This is simply basically combat the effects of forgetting so rapidly from one topic to the next, as well as also being more efficient. Treating a collection of words like si tuviera la oportunidad me gustaría hacerlo de nuevo, as shown in the last bullet, if you're treating that collection of words as a separate element and teaching and retrieving this would mean that more words are being processed and potentially learned at one time, then any potential difficulties with the explicit grammar teaching behind that chunk are moderated somewhat, and the transferability of the chunk itself, because it's so generic, across many topics would mean that it's a prime candidate to teach and test throughout the course, no matter what topic you're actually on. So ensuring that learners have had 20 to 30 times or so of practicing and retrieving a chunk like that would enable it to stand a fair chance of being able to be applied in the far transfer context of the end of the course. The other examples of the chunks also have the same benefits that are seen in that last bullet. If we look at a potential chunking model then, there could be 4 simple steps in order to go through to ensure that, chunks are well learned and also transferred and lead to transfer actually at the end of the course or at another point in time. And these are some of the steps on this potential chunking model that we're going to go into now. So looking at this step 1, we'll look at chunk practice first of all. So the next slide really here on this one looks at suggested strategies which could be used to practice a set of chunks. Many, if not even all of them, I would imagine, many teachers of MFL to be familiar with. So some of these are ways that could be used to practice chunks. The long-term aim of those chunks sticking and then therefore being able to be transferred in context. As regards to the actual presentation of these chunks to allow for the practice of them in class, I have enjoyed presenting the chunks, as I know many teachers have as well, of MFL, presenting the chunks as part of a sentence builder, as we can see there, as well as presenting them as set chunks, which appear on the right-hand side there, numbered 1 to 9. Again, the non-specific characteristic of many of these chunks on the right-hand side allows for transferability across a number of topics, and the fact that the chunks are numbered also helps to speed up the ways to refer to them in class. This brings us to chunk retrieval. So once those chunks have been practiced in a variety of ways, whatever the topic is, whenever we are in, whichever point we are in the course, brings us now to chunk retrieval, chunk testing. There's a number of great strategies which could again be adopted to practice retrieval of a chunk. One of the most straightforward though, and effective after looking at those 1 to 5, and of course there's many more, one of the most effective, I think, is just simply, as Gianfranco Conti and Steve Smith refer to, simply reading aloud phrases or sentences for students to translate. And crucially, I think I've adapted my own practice around this because of course, as soon as students come in now, instead of presenting a cue on the board for them to retrieve from, the cue now is just my spoken language. So students might just come in, and as soon as they come in, I would say one of the chunks, or 2 or 3 of them, and the students, I would either say those chunks in target language for the students to translate into English, or vice versa. But the crucial aspect is that there would be no written cue projected. All of this now brings us to the final stage, which is a narrow translation dictation. The narrow translation dictation involves the teacher dictating 3 narrow translations, which are all tied to a different topic. The translations are packed full, if we look at the first one there, the translations are packed full of the generic chunks. So with each dictation, the key input is flooded each time. And this is how it would work. The first dictation could be, as we can see on the slide, holidays. Students would obviously not see the text. So I would only see this, or the teacher would only see the passage to be dictated. So the power of dictation means that as the teacher, I'm able to control what is expected to be processed by the whole group bit by bit. The students are also told that should they not know the target language for anything that is dictated, they should then write the English for what is dictated for those parts, so that in the feedback stage and also the review stage some time after, both the student and the teacher can see what was known right there and then. So this level of dictation is testing the speed of retrieval in a way which is perhaps more effective than if the translation were just left up there with students working at different paces. So after then asking the students to give feedback on what English they wrote down, say for this first example, without showing the whole text, asking the students to give feedback on what English they wrote down and going through and diagnosing which bits didn't stick with them first of all, teacher and the other students in the class get a flavour for those bits that really just were not known at all. So you can gauge the level at which chunks within a text like that that's dictated, the level that they're known. And that then would is preceded by the teacher going then and writing the whole, or just of course showing a perfect translation after, to ensure that all of the students are clear in the in what they thought. If they thought obviously they hadn't got something right, or they thought they had got something right, but actually it turns out that they hadn't, then they would of course know by you feeding back on a written form then and going through it, with the students then correcting their own versions. And then the next stage would be students going onto a new, brand new like piece of paper or clean page without looking back at this. And as a teacher, I would dictate the second text. Now, the second text is another narrow translation, where it's a narrow translation of the holidays one, where basically I would be keeping the same underlying structures of the chunks. So things like, which has just been renovated, applying that again, where normally I have a good time, etc. But I should just say, just with those slight differences in aspects of vocabulary, so that the surface features are changed, yet I'm keeping and retaining the underlying structures, and also, again, following the rationale of dictation to ensure that I'm almost effectively managing that processing of the group bit by bit. Again, once I had dictated the second, this second text, the same feedback process would occur with me asking the group, first of all, which bits didn't stick, which bits haven't stick, can you tell me? And then writing those bits up on the board, discussing them, elaborating on them. Before then, of course, going through the whole text and rewriting that out, with students, again, marking it, ideally, of course, in different coloured pens, so you can see, especially as well, I did once say to a class to try and attempt it with, if they have to write any English down when I'm dictating, to do that in a different coloured pen as well. Not that that's hugely significant, but it can just help to add. If you're looking through quickly, you can see. That leaves us then going on to the third narrow translation, which is free time. So again, the same process would occur with me dictating, keeping the underlying structures, the key chunks, which has just been built or which has just been renovated, keeping things like that, but changing certain aspects of it, dictating that, and then again, feeding back, getting the students to feed back, I should say, on the aspects that they didn't know that they had to write English for straight away, and then writing a whole piece out. And having done that 3 times, I would then, following lesson or sometime down the line, a few lessons after perhaps, I would then look at trying to move to a level of transfer. So my transfer task could, of course, be an exam question. What I really like to do, instead of just looking straight for an exam question, is to try and move the learners to a stage where they can respond to a single cue, like one of those, 1, 2, 3 there, write all that you can about holidays, simply just presenting a cue like that, so that we can really try and test the speed of retrieval based on a simple cue to trigger that, like that, which I like to think would give me an idea of their level of relative automaticity, I suppose, at this stage. And that's it. It's a shortened version of a potential model of teaching chunking. Thank you for listening, and I hope this will be of some use.